There are things that get buried, not in the ground, in silence, and sometimes silence is more dangerous than any fire. This is a story about a map, a real one, folded once, then twice, then hidden inside a place nobody thought to look. A map that showed exactly where William and Kate were supposed to go and exactly who tried to make sure they never got there. It started on a Tuesday morning, quiet, gray. The kind of morning where London feels like it's holding its breath. William was sitting in a chair near the window of a modest office inside Kensington Palace. Not the grand rooms, the back ones. The rooms where actual work gets done. He had a cup of tea untouched. He was reading something. His eyes stopped moving. He read the same line 3 times. Kate walked in behind him. She could always tell when something was wrong. Not from what he said. From the way his shoulders sat, to still. Too tight? What is it? She asked. He didn't answer right away. That scared her more than anything he could have said. If you've ever felt like something important was being hidden from you, hidden by people who were supposed to protect you, then you already understand what William felt in that moment. That hollow feeling, that slow burn behind the ribs. And if this kind of story moves you, if real human moments like this matter to you, take a second and subscribe. There are more stories coming that you won't want to miss. Back to that morning. The document William was reading wasn't supposed to reach him. It had passed through 3 different hands before landing on his desk. Someone had slipped it into a routine briefing folder, almost like an accident. But it wasn't. Nothing in a palace is ever an accident. The document referenced a route, path, a specific plan for William and Kate's upcoming public engagement, a community visit in East London that had been organized for months, local schools, families, real people who had waited a long time for this visit. But inside the document, buried in the middle, was a note. Small, almost casual. It said the original route map had been destroyed, not lost. Not misplaced. Destroyed. William set the paper down. He looked out the window. The gray sky sat low over the trees. He thought about who had access to that route map. Who knew the original plan? Who had the ability to remove it quietly, without anyone raising an alarm? The list was short, and one name on that list made his jaw tighten. Camilla now? Before anyone misunderstands, this is not about hatred. It's not about sides. It's about what happens when power sits in the wrong hands for too long. When someone decides, quietly, behind closed doors, that they get to choose what gets seen and what disappears. Kate picked up the document. She read the note. She looked at William. Neither of them spoke. Outside, a car moved slowly through the palace gates. Rain had started. Soft at first, then heavier. The kind of rain that means something is coming. William finally spoke. There was a second map, he said. Kate looked up. Remember it, he continued. I saw it. Months ago, before any of this was finalized. Someone made a copy. Who? Kate asked. William stood up from the chair. That's what we need to find out. It's at that moment, that quiet, determined moment, was where everything began to unravel. Slowly at first, then all at once, asterisk. Asterisk, the rain didn't stop. It kept coming down all afternoon, steady, cold. The kind that soaks through slowly without you noticing until it's too late. William made one phone call. He didn't use the official line. He used a personal mobile. Old, simple. The kind of phone that doesn't get logged in any system. He called a man named Thomas. A quiet man. Retired civil servant. Someone who had spent 30 years moving quietly through government corridors, remembering everything, saying very little. Thomas had been a friend of William's late mother. That connection mattered. It still mattered very much. Thomas picked up on the second ring. William didn't explain everything. He didn't need to. He just said there was a document, a route, something that had been removed. And he asked one question. Do you know if anyone kept a copy of the original East London map? Silence on the line. Then Thomas said, "Give me 2 hours." William hung up. Kate was standing near the fireplace. She hadn't moved much since that morning. Her arms were crossed, not from cold, from tension. That particular kind of tension that settles in when you realize the ground under your feet is less solid than you thought. "We can't tell anyone yet," William said. "I know," she replied, and they both knew what they were really saying. This was delicate. If they moved too fast, things would disappear. More things, deeper things. The kind of things that leave no trace at all. Kate thought about the families waiting in East London, the children. The school that had painted a mural in preparation for the visit, the community center that had planned for weeks. Real people, real effort, real hope. Someone had tried to reroute all of that, or stop it entirely. The question was why, too. Hours passed slowly. Thomas called back. His voice was careful, measured. He chose every word like he was placing something fragile on a shelf. There was a second map, he said. A working copy. Made early in the planning process. Pause. It was kept by a woman named Margaret. She was a junior coordinator. She worked on palace logistics for about 8 months before she was quietly let go. William asked where Margaret was now. Thomas gave him an address. A flat in South London. Quiet street. 3rd floor. She may still have it, Thomas said. She kept everything. That was always her habit. Another pause. She was also never told why her contract ended. Line went quiet for a moment. Then Thomas added, something that made William's chest tighten. She was let go the same week the route was finalized. The timing was not a coincidence. William knew it. Thomas knew it. And somewhere, whoever had made that call knew it too, he told Kate. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "We need to go to her." "Not officially," William said. Kate agreed. "Not officially." This was the part that people don't see. The part that never makes the news. 2 people, a prince and his wife, sitting in a quiet room, making careful decisions. Knowing that one wrong move could erase everything they were trying to protect, they decided to go. The following morning, no aides. No security detail beyond what was absolutely necessary. Just them, and the address Thomas had given that night. William sat alone for a while after Kate had gone to bed. He thought about his mother, about how often she'd said that the palace had a way of making things vanish, documents, conversations, people. He hadn't fully believed her then. He was starting to now outside. The rain had finally stopped, but the silence it left behind felt heavy, loaded, like the moment before something drops. Asterisk. The next morning was cold and white. Frost on the windows. Bare trees. The kind of morning that feels like the world is holding very still. They left early, before most of the palace had woken up. Kate wore a dark coat. Simple, nothing that would draw attention. William pulled a cap low over his forehead. They looked like 2 ordinary people heading somewhere quiet. That was the point. The drive to South London took just under an hour. The streets changed as they moved. Wider roads narrowing into smaller ones. Old brick buildings, corner shops just opening. A world that moved at a different pace than the one they usually lived in. They parked on a side street. William looked at the building. Narrow, 4 floors. Dark green door at the base. A buzzer panel with small white labels beside each flat number. He found the name M. Holloway. 3rd floor. He pressed the buzzer. Nothing for a long moment. Then a voice. Cautious. Small. Yes. William leaned toward the intercom. "My name is William," he said. Simply, quietly. "I think you may have something that belongs to a story I need to understand." Silence. A long silence. Then the door clicked open. The staircase was narrow and smelled of old carpet and faint cooking. They climbed to the 3rd floor. A door was already open a crack. A woman stood behind it. Late 40s, tired eyes, but sharp, very sharp. She looked at William, then Kate, then back to William. She let them in without a word. The flat was small and ordered. Books stacked carefully. A desk with neat piles of paper. On one wall, a pinboard covered with notes and printed emails and small yellow sticky tabs. Margaret Holloway had not stopped working. Even after she was let go, she had kept everything. She made tea. They sat, and then she spoke. She said she'd been waiting for someone to come. She hadn't known who, or when. But she'd always felt, always known, that the map mattered. That the reason she'd been let go mattered. She had put it together slowly, over months, piece by piece. They changed the route, she said. The original plan took you through the Aldgate community, the schools, the high street, places that needed the visibility. She wrapped her hands around her mug. The new route avoided all of that. Clean streets, controlled spaces, nothing unscripted. Kate asked who had ordered the change. Margaret was quiet for a moment. The instruction came from above the logistics team, she said carefully. I was told it was a security decision, but when I asked our security coordinator, he had no record of making that call. She paused. Someone gave the order and made sure it looked like it came from someone else. William asked if she still had the original map. She nodded. She stood, went to a shelf, moved 3 books aside. Behind them was a flat cardboard folder. She carried it back to the table and set it down. She opened it. Inside was the original route, hand-annotated, color-coded, every stop marked with times and contact names. It was detailed, careful, the work of someone who had planned something with genuine care for the people it was meant to reach. At the bottom corner, there was a note in small printed text. Approved pending final review. It had never received that final review, because it had disappeared before anyone could give it. Kate looked at the map for a long time. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were working, reading, absorbing. William looked at Margaret. Why didn't you come forward before? He asked. Not accusingly, gently. Margaret looked down at her hands. Because I didn't think anyone would listen, she said quietly. I'm a junior coordinator. I was let go. Who was going to hear me? The room was very still. Outside, a bus went by, muffled, distant. William reached across the table. We're listening, he said. And something in Margaret's face shifted, like a door had opened that she hadn't expected to open. Like relief, real, physical relief, had finally arrived after a very long wait. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. Because what Margaret said next changed everything. Asterisk Margaret reached back into the folder. There was something else inside. Beneath the map, a printed email chain, short. Just 3 messages. But each one more unsettling than the last. She placed it on the table. William. And Kate read it together. The first message was, Administrative routine. A. Reminder about the logistics timeline for the East London engagement. Nothing unusual. The second message was a reply. It flagged the original route as unsuitable for current optics. That phrase, unsuitable for current optics. Bureaucratic, cold, meaning it looked bad for someone. Just not for William and Kate. The third message was the one that mattered. It read, Proceed with revised route. Dispose of original documentation. Do not retain copies. No signature. No name. But at the top of the email, there was a sender address. It had been partially redacted with a black marker. Someone had printed it and then tried to obscure it. But the marker had faded slightly at the edges. And in the right light, if you tilted the page just enough, the domain was visible. It was an internal palace address. Senior level. The kind of address that only a small number of people had access to. Kate set the page down very slowly. She said nothing. But her jaw was tight and her eyes were focused on the middle distance. The look she got when she was thinking very hard and very fast. William stared at the page. He knew what this was. He had grown up around institutions. He knew how they protected themselves, how they moved quietly, how they made uncomfortable things disappear without fingerprints. But seeing it written down, seeing the instruction to destroy the original, to wipe the record, that was something different. That was not an accident or an oversight. That was a decision made by a person who believed they would never be held accountable. Margaret spoke again. She said there was one more thing. She got up again. This time, she went to a small drawer in the kitchen. She came back with a USB drive, small, black, ordinary looking. I digitized everything, she said. Before I left. I didn't know why I did it. I just felt like I should. She set it on the table next to the map, as copies of the original route, the emails, the internal calendar entries showing when the route was changed and who was logged into the system at that time. It paused. It has everything. The weight of that word settled over the room. Everything. William looked at Kate. She gave a small nod, almost invisible. He looked back at Margaret. You kept this all this time, he said. I kept it because I believed in what that engagement was supposed to be, she said quietly. Those communities, those schools, they deserve the visit that was planned for them, not the cleaned-up version that someone decided was safer. Her voice stayed even, but only just. People in those neighborhoods, they don't get many moments where they feel seen. That visit was supposed to be one of those moments. She looked directly at William. Someone took it away. I wanted there to be a record of that. The room was very quiet. Kate reached forward and covered Margaret's hand with her own for a moment. No words, just that. It was enough. William picked up the USB drive. He held it carefully, like it was something that could break, something that could set something right. He asked Margaret what she wanted. She thought about that for a moment. Then she said, I want the original route to happen. Even now, even late. She paused. And I want the people who planned it, the community workers, the teachers, the families, I want them to know it wasn't forgotten. It was such a simple thing to want, and yet it had taken all of this. To even get close to making it possible, they left the flat an hour later. The cold had deepened. Their breath came out in small white clouds. They walked back to the car in silence. Inside, before William started the engine, Kate said quietly, We need to move carefully. Yes, he said. Because whoever sent that email, she continued, they're still there. Still inside. Still watching? He nodded. He started the car, and neither of them said what they were both thinking. That the road ahead was not going to be smooth. That whoever had burned that first map, whoever had written those words, dispose of original documentation. They were not going to simply step aside, not without a fight. Asterisk, asterisk, 3 days passed, careful days. Quiet on the surface. But underneath, things were moving. William had passed the USB drive to Thomas. Trusted, careful Thomas, who knew which questions to ask, and more importantly, who to ask them to. People who had no reason to protect the wrong side of this story. Kate had quietly contacted the original planning team, the one that had built the real route. Most of them were still around. Some had moved to different departments. One had left the palace entirely. But all of them remembered the plan. All of them remembered the day they were told, without explanation, that everything had changed. They had assumed it was above them. That someone with more authority had decided. They'd moved on, but they hadn't forgotten. None of them had. Meanwhile, inside the palace, something was shifting. Small signs. The kind that only people who knew how to read them would notice. Certain meetings canceled. Certain people suddenly harder to reach. A particular senior aide, who had always been visible, always in the corridor, always with a schedule in hand, was now suddenly absent, William noticed. He said nothing yet, but he noticed on the 4th day. Thomas called. He had traced the email domain, confirmed the senior level access, and with the calendar entries from the USB, he had matched the login timestamp to a specific device. Registered to a specific individual. He didn't say the name on the phone. He asked William to come to him. They met in a small sitting room at the edge of a private club in Mayfair. Wood-paneled, hot and quiet. The kind of room where serious things had been decided for a very long time. Thomas slid a single sheet of paper across the table. On it was a name. One of Camilla's senior personal staff members. A woman who had been with her for years, loyal, discreet. Someone who moved so seamlessly through palace life that most people barely noticed her. She had been the one who sent the email, but Thomas believed. And the evidence suggested that she had not acted alone, that the instruction had come from above her, that she had simply been the hand that pressed. Send the direction had come from somewhere higher. William sat with that for a long moment. He thought about what this meant officially, politically, personally. He thought about the layers of it, the sensitivity of it. He was not a man who moved on impulse. He had been trained by life more than by tutors to think before he acted. But he also thought about Margaret, sitting in that small flat, waiting for years, holding onto a folder of documents because no one had come to listen. And he thought about the families in East London who had painted murals and made plans and waited for a visit that never came the way it was supposed to. He picked up the paper. He folded it once. He put it in his inside pocket. What do we do with this? He asked Thomas. Thomas looked at him steadily. That depends on what you want to happen, he said. You could make it formal. Put it through proper channels. It would take time. It would get complicated. And there are people in those channels who would slow it down or redirect it. He paused. Or you could use it differently. More directly, William asked what he meant by that. You could simply go, Thomas said. With Kate to East London. With the original route. With the community that was supposed to receive you. He looked at William. Let the visit happen the way it was always supposed to happen. And let that be your answer. It's a simple idea. Powerful in its simplicity. Not a press conference. Not a statement. Not a battle fought through lawyers and leaked documents. Just a prince and his wife walking through a community that had been quietly overlooked and letting that walk speak for itself. William thought about it. Then he said, and the person who gave the order? Thomas was quiet for a moment. Some things get answered in the open, he said. Some get answered in time. He looked at his hands. The map existed. You found it. That's already more than they planned for. It wasn't a full answer. William knew that, but it was a beginning. He left the club and walked out into the gray Mayfair afternoon. He called Kate. He told her what Thomas had said. She listened. Then she said, let's go to East London. And something in her voice, steady and quiet and absolutely certain, made it feel like the most right thing that had been said in a very long time. But there was one more thing they didn't know yet. One more piece of the story that was still waiting to surface. And it was already on its way to them. Asterisk, the day arrived on a Thursday. Clear sky. Cold, but still. The kind of morning that feels like something has been decided. William and Kate left early. This time with a small, trusted team. People they had chosen themselves. No one from the official coordination office. No one whose loyalty sat in an uncertain place. They followed the original route, the one Margaret had kept. The one that had been planned by people who actually knew the community. Every stop, every street, every school, exactly as it had been drawn months ago. Their first stop was a primary school on a quiet road near Spotigate. The children had been told they were coming, but they hadn't been told when exactly. So when the car pulled up and the doors opened, the reaction was real, not rehearsed. Just real. A little girl near the front looked up and said something to her teacher. Her teacher looked up too. And then, quietly, without anyone organizing it, the children began to clap. It started small. Then it spread. Kate's eyes filled. She blinked it back, smiled, walked forward. She crouched down to speak to the children at their level. She stayed there a long time, longer than any official schedule would have allowed. She listened to them. Actually listened. A boy told her about a book he was reading. Another one showed her a drawing he'd made. A girl with 2 braids asked her if she'd ever been scared. Kate looked at her for a moment. She said honestly, "Sometimes. But being scared doesn't mean you stop." The girl nodded, very seriously. They moved through the community the way the original plan had intended. The high street. The community center that had been waiting for this visit for months. The mural. An enormous thing. Blues and golds and deep greens. A painted image of connection and pride and belonging. Made by local artists. Made for this moment, William stood in front of it for a long time. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Later, inside the community center, he sat with local leaders. He listened to what they had been building. What they needed? What had been overlooked in policy meeting after policy meeting? He took notes by hand. Old habit, personal. One-man community director, mid-50s. The kind of man who had been working quietly for his neighborhood for 30 years without recognition. Shook William's hand at the end. He said, "We didn't think you were coming." Not really. Things get promised. Then they change. William met his eyes. "We almost didn't," he said, quietly, honestly. The man nodded. He seemed to understand that this was not a small thing to admit. "But you did," the man said. "Yes," William said. "We did." That was the whole of it. Right there. In those few words, on the way back, Kate and William sat in the car in silence for a while. The city moved past the windows. Old buildings. New ones. People going about their ordinary Thursday, Kate said. "Margaret should know." "She will," William said. He had already arranged for someone to call her, to tell her the route had happened, exactly as she'd planned it. Every stop, every community, every school, she would receive that call later that afternoon. And when she did, she sat in her small flat with the pinboard on the wall and the careful stacks of paper. She cried. She cried in the way people cry when something they'd quietly given up on suddenly turns out to have mattered after all. As for the email, the evidence, the name on Thomas's sheet of paper, it moved forward quietly through the right channels. No headlines. No spectacle. The kind of accountability that works slowly and seriously and without fanfare. Some things don't get resolved in an afternoon. Some things take time, but they get resolved. What happened that Thursday in East London could not be undone. The children who shook Kate's hand. The man who had worked 30 years without recognition and finally felt seen. The mural that had been painted in hope and received in person, that was real, permanent, unburnable. A map had been hidden, then found. A path had been erased, then walked. Some things are harder to destroy than people think. And some people are braver, quieter, more ordinary, more persistent than anyone in a palace ever expects them to be. That's the part of the story they didn't plan for. That's always the part that changes everything.